My name is Bernice Weiner. Today is April 2nd, 1998. I am here to interview Marcia Sachs, who is a survivor of the Nazi Holocaust. I am doing this under the auspices of the Holocaust Documentation and Education Center, Incorporated. The purpose of this interview is to add to the oral history of the Holocaust, so that through this living memorial, future generations will know what happened. With this knowledge, we hope to prevent any such occurrence in the future. Marcia, I want to thank you for coming today and allowing me to interview you.
My pleasure.
Let us begin by your stating, what is your full name?
My full name, my first name?
Yes.
It was Mania, M-A-N-I-A, but for some reason here in the States they tried to call me Marcia.
And what was your maiden name?
My maiden name was Mell, M-E-double-L.
And your marriage name?
My marriage name is Sachs, S-A-C-H-S.
And let us begin by first talking about the town from which you were born. Where were you born?
I was born in Lodz.
Which is in what country?
That's Poland.
And what was the date of your birth?
April the 21st, 1925.
Let's talk about the pre-war years. What was it like growing up in Lodz?
Well, the thing is that as a child, I don't remember, I must have been very young when we moved out from Lodz, and we moved to a small town, Breziny. The name, it was a few miles, I don't know whether it was 15 miles or whatever. It was a small town.
Can you spell that for me?
Breziny, B-D-Z-E-N-Y. Breziny.
And you say that you were very small at the time that you moved.
Right.
About how big a town was Breziny?
How big? It was fairly, it wasn't big, let's put it this way.
About how large a population?
I would say, gee, I should have known. I would have asked. More or less, Jewish population must have been at least 10,000 Jews.
And what do you estimate that the general population was, the total population?
The total population with Gentiles must have been at least about 20 or 25.
How did most people earn their living in Breziny?
Well, most people, like for instance us, my father was a manufacturer of clothes at the time in Lodz. Then he had a partner and they went bankrupt. So they moved to Breziny. And he had an uncle there of some relatives from his first wife, because my father had a wife. My mother was his second wife. Well, I'll go after that, before that. And they went, so he started making also clothes. So he was like a contractor.
And how did most of the Jews earn their living in Breziny? Was it in small businesses?
Small, very little businesses that people, our Jews had it. Mostly was tailors.
Now let's talk about your family. How many children were there in your family,
Okay.
brothers and sisters?
Okay, together there were 3 brothers and 1 sister.
And what were their names?
The name was, the oldest was Pessa. The other one was Yanko, Berek, and Chaim.
And were there any sisters?
No, that's it.
And you were the only daughter then?
You see, that's right. My father remarried, and my mother, and they had me just, and they had, from the other mother, there were 4 children.
So you were the youngest of the 5
I was the
children.
only one, and the youngest one just from my mother.
What was your father's name?
My father's name was Shmil Dubit.
And your mother's?
Liftscher.
And her maiden name?
Her maiden name was Gedankengott.
Were you able to go to school in this small town?
Yes.
And did you go to public school or did you go to a Jewish school?
Yes, I went to public school. I also, at the same time, I went to Hebrew school, Pesyankov.
And were you aware of any feelings of anti-Semitism in this town?
Yes, indeed.
Could you tell
Yes,
me about
indeed.
them, please?
Well, this is a coincidence that I'll never forget. My youngest brother, he always wanted to see excitements. So around the corner there was a funeral, Polish funeral, where we also had the church right across where we lived. And he went out to look, just, for curiosity, he watched the funeral. And all of a sudden, somebody, one of the boys, whatever, whoever, cut his face. He had to have at least about 10 stitches. And I'll never forget that.
And this was just as a reaction to his watching this funeral take place?
He didn't do anything against anybody. He was just watching. And then that's what happened.
Did you have any anti-Semitic actions take place against you?
Well, I wouldn't say so, because I happen to be friendly with some of the Gentiles kids, which our relationship was okay. You see, our public school, we just had the Jewish school, the boys and girls together, where they had also a Gentile school, which we had nothing to do with that Gentile school.
So you attended a public school that was just for Jewish children?
Exactly.
So even at that level, you were separated from the rest of the population in the town?
Right.
As you were growing up and you got older, did these feelings of anti-Semitism still persist in the town?
I didn't have that experience, other than they just, cut my brother's face. But other than that, I didn't feel that way, because I was a person that I liked when somebody was nice. I was even nicer. As a matter of fact, we lived in a building that Gentile owners, they owned it, and it was very good. When the Passover came, we used to give the matzahs to them. So it wasn't, I didn't think that at that time.
Was there a very well-organized Jewish community in this small town?
Yes.
What were some of the organizations that people belonged to?
There was the Pesyankov, of course, was Ben something with the Bet Israel or something. Was one of the organizations that in fact one of my oldest brother belonged. I forgot the name.
And what were these organizations about?
It was about wanting to go to Israel.
Did you belong to any of these organizations?
The only time I belonged was that I attended Hebrew school. But I wasn't. No, I didn't.
Let's talk now about the years just prior to the war. Before the start of the war, did you hear about any incidents that were going on in Germany?
I didn't. No.
Did you ever hear your family, your mother, your father, or older brothers talking about what was going on?
They were talking about it. In fact, before even the Germans came in, my oldest brother escaped. This was when they opened the ghetto. Oh, no, 1942. Or was it 19?
Well, let's not skip ahead. Let's stay pre-war.
Okay.
So there was talk in your house about incidents that you were hearing or reading about in the newspaper.
That happens in Germany.
And what were you hearing? What were some of the things that you were discussing?
That they were beating the Jews, and a lot of people, Jews, escaped someplace else to the United States, and that's about all that.
Did any people from Germany come into your area of town at all, any of the Jews that were escaping Germany? Was there any talk in your home about perhaps leaving, either individually or as a family?
Yes, I heard they were talking about it, but we didn't do anything because my father was against it, that we should be separate. And this was before the Germans came in.
Were your older brothers talking at all about leaving prior to the war?
Two brothers, yeah, two brothers. One brother, I think one brother, the oldest, he was saying, because he had a girlfriend, that her grandparents lived in Russia, and they were thinking about going to Russia. Right.
Now, did he leave?
He left just before the Germans came in.
And where did he go?
They went to Russia.
And your other brothers remained at home?
My brother, no, my middle brother, Berg, also went with him.
What were your feelings when you saw them leaving?
Well, we were hoping they're going to come back.
But what about yourself? Were you uneasy about the fact that your parents were not making any kind of a gesture to leave?
No, I felt that they're right, and we want to be with our family together.
Did you begin to see any changes in the people in the town whom you knew just prior to the war?
Not really till the planes came in.
What was the date that the planes came in?
That was in 1932. Let's see, I wrote it down. In 1939.
1939. Do you remember the month?
Yes, it was September.
And do you know the date?
The date, I don't. I know it was on a Friday at 12 o'clock. What happened? Well, all of a sudden we hear the planes coming in and the bombs are coming down. My oldest sister was married and she had 2 children, and she was living with us at the time, and we were all hiding under the floor, any place that we could think, the closets, and some of them were killed instantly, some neighbors, some people that we know, and that was it. And then a few days later, the Germans came in.
Now, had you any warning that this attack was going to take place?
No, nothing whatsoever.
So the first thing that made you aware was that you heard the planes overhead. What was the first reaction in your home?
Boy, it was scary, frightening. It was okay. We didn't think that this is gonna, exist. I mean, that this will happen. But
were your parents both at home at the time? Do you remember any of the things that they said to you as this was going on?
Well, they couldn't tell because we didn't know at the time. We didn't. So we were just praying to God that it shouldn't happen again.
Now, what did you do? You said you went and you hid. Where did you go to hide?
Under the closet, one of the bathrooms.
How long did this bombing last? Do you remember?
It lasted for a couple hours one day, and they came back the next day.
After the bombing the first day, when you came out of hiding, what did you find? What did you see had happened?
Well, we saw a lot of people killed, a lot of homes ruined, a lot of buildings. Thank God that our building wasn't touched. And we just
what were
waited.
some of the scenes in the street right after that bombing?
Scaring, crying. A lot of people were killed.
And what about you?
Well, thank God, I was fine with my parents and my youngest brother.
Do you remember what the talk was in your home after that? Did they start to make any preparations in case this happened again?
Not at the time, because we still didn't believe it, that the Germans will come in. And
Anyone you know hurt in that first bombing?
some people that, neighbors, young people, and from other buildings, other streets.
Remember what your thoughts were at the time of that first bombing?
Well, the thoughts were, why is this happening and why should it happen? And we didn't know really what's going to happen with us.
When did the planes come the following day?
Next morning came in like unexpectedly, 10 o'clock. I can't recall the times, but we were always looking up and hearing. We put the lights down, that the lights shouldn't be, that they should see buildings when the planes
So this was at
come by.
night.
Yeah.
And what happened in the second bombing?
Second bombing, they already came early in the morning. Different areas.
So the second bombing was not in your area?
No. And different areas, and didn't touch us.
What was the reaction of the community at this time?
Frightening.
Any preparations made in case they returned
There
again?
were some people that did had preparation, that did some preparation. They were running towards Warsaw. They thought maybe in Warsaw the Poles will prevent themselves from the shoot back. But we felt we want to stay in one place. And
What happened after that?
after that, they decided they're going to do is make a ghetto.
How long after the second bombing did that happen?
I would say about 2 weeks, when the soldiers were in already.
All right.
The army
When
was
did you
in.
first begin to see the German soldiers? How long after that second bombing?
I would say maybe 5 days.
What was your response when you first saw the Germans in your community?
Oh, gee. We thought, they're not going to do, other than the bombs came down, they're not going to do anything to it, So they said, well, we're closing the ghetto, we'll give you work. And that's what we were told, that's what's going to happen.
So before the ghetto, Marcia, before the ghetto was formed, there was a 2-week period, you say, a few weeks before the ghetto was formed. How did your life change during those 2 weeks with the Germans in authority in the town?
Well, we didn't know what to say, we didn't know what to think, and we didn't know what the next day will bring, the next hour will bring. So we were waiting.
Any laws imposed upon you during those 2 weeks by the Germans when they first came in?
No.
So your life pretty much went on as
Not really, not really.
How did it change?
It changed, being in fear all the time, every minute. We didn't know what's going to happen. And each time, before even when they closed the ghetto, then we could see the difference.
But on the street prior to the ghetto, did the Germans treat the population poorly, or was it just that they were present in the town?
No. They made appeals. They made buildings by building.
That was before the ghetto?
That was before the ghetto. And they were shipped out some people.
And this happened right after they came into the town?
Yeah, they start already taking the people with the beards, the rabbis, the all kinds.
All right, how did you first learn about these appels that were going to go on? How did you first learn about them?
We saw it.
Was there
that
any
happened.
notification that they were going
Yes,
to be
there
doing?
were notifications that this one and this one, this store, they closed up stores, they closed up the schools before even the ghetto was open.
How soon after their arrival in town did the schools close?
I would say immediately.
And the stores too that
Yeah.
had Jewish owners?
Yes.
What about your father's business?
My father's business, he was working in our house.
Now, once this happened,
Then they bombed the building where my father used to do business with.
that was the
That-
second bombing, or
That was, I think it was the first bombing, in fact.
so he, after the first bombing, began to work at home?
No, he worked all the time at home.
Oh, I see.
In other words, you see, here in the States you have contractors, they have shops, right? My father has a shop in where we lived.
The schools were closed.
Yeah.
You see the stores being closed.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the scenes that you saw on the street? What type of treatment did the German soldiers give to the
Well, they
population?
tried to, some of them, they shoot even people. And they start giving us the stars, Jewish, you know, that we should do it ourselves and put
You
it
were
on.
a child of about 13 or 14 at this time.
Right.
What's your feeling about having to wear a Jewish star, a yellow star?
Terrible feeling. We didn't know. It was really very sad.
Did you just go along with it? Did you feel that you were...
Well, we still were hoping that it will change, that this is not going to be forever, that something will, you know, God will do something.
But as these orders came, the population followed these orders as they were issued.
Exactly.
Now, you mentioned before that they particularly, the soldiers, would go after the more religious Jews in the community. Describe for me what happened to these people.
They sent them away or shot them.
Did you witness any of this on the streets?
Yes, from far away.
What did you see?
We saw, he got together a few young people, in fact, young men, and you shoot them. They shoot them.
Were you witness to this?
I saw it from far away.
This went on for how long prior to the formation of the ghetto?
The ghetto, I would say about 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks.
About how many people prior to the formation of the ghetto were shipped from the town, were taken?
Big amount. Yeah, a big amount. In fact, they shipped out my sister and her 2 children.
When did this happen?
It happened just right. I don't remember whether she was in the ghetto with us. I don't think so.
So you
She
think,
left before even the ghetto.
So you think this happened during that 2-week period when they...
More or less.
Was she living with you at the time?
Well, they had an apartment someplace else with her husband. Her husband remained in the ghetto. And she came to visit us because they were scared. And they stayed for a few nights, a few days, they stayed in our house. But they took them away.
From your home or from their own home?
I think from their own home. Because they went back, I think. I think so.
What about your older brothers who were still at home? Were any of them still at home at this time?
No. No. My youngest brother was home.
And during this time, did they try, were they ever in your home, the soldiers, or did they?
No, they didn't come into the, not till the ghetto opened.
Now, they passed out the yellow identification stars. What other laws and regulations were laid down prior to the ghetto?
Well, before the ghetto, I don't remember what, but in the ghetto, I do remember.
Do you remember how you were told that you were going to be going into a ghetto?
Yes.
How did that happen?
They were saying, we had a Jewish commander, and he was telling us, and they announced in each yard, in each home, that so many people, and they were assigned to what area they're going to be living. They want to be going where they one people, like we had 3 rooms, where we went to 1 room. And they were assigned only 1 room at a time, even a big family. In fact, 2 families were also in 1 room.
Now, you mentioned that there was a Jewish person in charge. When did this organization take place?
The Jews, they were right in the beginning.
And do you know the name of this person that was in charge?
I don't remember.
So prior to your going into the ghetto, you were told where you were going to live and how many rooms you would have. What were you told you could take with you?
Very little.
Do you remember what your family, some of the things that your family did take with them?
We couldn't take the furniture. We couldn't. We just took our clothes and a few belongings that we have.
Now, do you remember the date that you entered the ghetto?
Yes, in 1939, September, at 12 o'clock on a Friday.
And how did you get to the ghetto? How far was it from where you were living?
Not far. The town wasn't that big.
So they organized the people and you walked into the ghetto.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember your thoughts and feelings as you were leaving your home?
Well, we still had hopes, and we still figure, you know, maybe this is our home, or for permanent, or just. You see, I was young at the time, and many things came into my mind. So.
Do you remember? Can you recall any of them? You were a teenager at the time.
No, the only time what I remember is, Bernice, is, did you see the Lodz ghetto opened before the Breziny ghetto?
This was the Breziny ghetto that you went into?
Yes, right. Before even we went to Breziny ghetto, to the Lodz ghetto. In the Breziny ghetto, there were people passing by, escaping, going towards further away. And they were stopping in our house, where my father used to be a word, like they would give something to us, and we would let him stay for the night. We'd give him food, and so on. As many people we took in, most of them were sleeping on the floors till the next morning. Now my brother, the youngest brother, had a job. He felt, I want to see that my parents have bread enough to eat. So he was a smuggler. You know what a smuggler means. He was smuggling people from the Lodz ghetto to Breziny.
Do you know how he accomplished this?
At first, he had to hide the people, it was a tough decision and a tough thing to do, what he was doing. It was against the rule, it was against the, the policy and so on.
Did he ever tell you how he was able to get these people out of the Lodz ghetto?
He got them in, and there were people that did this, were telling him who to take out and so on and so forth. But what happened is they caught him at the end.
How many years did he do this before he was caught?
I would say a year.
So in about the end of 40, he was caught.
Right.
What happened to him when he was caught?
They were going to hang him. We had a big yard. It's called the Vinnhorst circle. And they were going to hang him. But instead of him, where the guy that he was the manager, and he was a friend of ours or some relatives, I think, to my family, from my father's, from my, you know, and they took somebody else. They took a woman who was a crazy woman, and they hanged her instead. But instead, to hang him, they shipped him off to Auschwitz. And here it is. See?
This is a list of the people that were shipped on January 30th, 1943. And Mania Mell is your brother's name.
Right.
Were you with your brother at the time that this happened?
No, we did. We stayed home. We stayed home and we were praying. We had candles.
Marcia, if we can, go back to the day that you entered the ghetto.
Which ghetto?
The Breziny ghetto, which was the first ghetto.
The first ghetto, it was in I had it written down here, September 39. But apparently, when they shipped them off, they probably didn't do anything. He must have stayed there, because they shipped them off earlier than that, as it is, you know. I have some tissues, thank you. We got this now in Ravensbruck.
When you were back in the country.
Right. So this was a tragedy. He was young.
How old was he, Marcia?
So he was born in, it says here,
1920.
Yeah, in 1920.
So he was 19.
In 1939.
He was 19.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, right. But that was some tragedy. Oh, the whole time we had to go and watch this, mind you that. But that's what happened. He was so good. He risked his life for us. You could ask me further.
If we can go back to that first day you went into the Breziny ghetto, when you got into your one-room apartment, were you and your family there alone, or was there other people living in that one room with you?
No, we were alone. It was a nice apartment, yes, with a balcony, you know, and overlooking a big yard that people were crossing from one building, from one street to another. So there was always people passing by. So.
How large an area was the Breziny ghetto?
Not large.
About how many streets?
Oh, gee, you see what happened is that we couldn't get out during the day. I mean, we had to be in a certain time, and we couldn't get out. So I would have to get back to you. I don't know how many, let's see, 1, 2, 3, had to be about 4 or 5 streets altogether that the ghetto was.
You mentioned just now that there were limitations on the times that you could come and go.
Right.
What other laws and restrictions were placed upon you in the ghetto?
see.
How were you able to get food?
They used to supply us with food, very little food. Very little.
Do you remember about what you were able to get and what you were eating during the day?
Mostly, I would say, bread. I don't remember if we had books in the Breziny ghetto. Where in the Lodz ghetto, where we were, we had certain books that we got some books and you're entitled to get half a pound of sugar for the week, a pound of potatoes and bread.
But what in the Breziny ghetto you do not remember?
No, in Breziny ghetto, I think there was, you could still go out. There weren't too many stores, but you could still go out and get some food. Not much, but...
Was this an enclosed ghetto? Or
yes, yes.
Who was in charge of this ghetto?
It was the Jewish organization. It's a certain Jewish organization. Like I said, one of the guys, I don't remember the names.
Now, what was your daily routine while you were in the ghetto?
I didn't work at the time. And I think we didn't do anything, just wait.
Was there any kind of a roll call in the morning? Did you have to follow any kind of a routine? Describe that to me.
They used to come in, and people should come out. Children, old people, sick people, and they will just send them away, just like that. They were telling us that they're going to a place where they could work and get food, make money, and so on and so forth.
Now, were your parents working when you were living in this ghetto?
In this ghetto, no, I don't think so, no.
Was there a Judenrat in the ghetto?
Yeah, yes.
And what was their function?
Their function was only to ship out the people, as many as they could.
And can you recall the name of the man who was the head of the Judenrat? What was the feeling of the people towards the Judenrat?
I'm not so much familiar. The only thing is I remember the Lodz ghetto better than the Breziny ghetto, because we didn't stay too long in the Breziny ghetto.
How long were you in the Breziny ghetto?
I would say a half a year.
During that time, was there much illness within the Breziny ghetto?
Yes, yes. People were dying.
What happened to people if they became ill?
They just died. They died out.
Was there any
lack of food.
Were there any epidemics within the ghetto during that
There
time?
were epidemics, not as much in Breziny ghetto, not as much.
Which epidemics took place in the Breziny ghetto?
There weren't any.
There weren't.
Too many, no, there weren't.
And was there any help for people in the Breziny ghetto if they did get ill? Was there any medication available?
No, they just shipped them out.
There were no Jewish doctors that were taking care of the population that was there that you were aware of?
I'm not aware of it.
Was there a Jewish police force in the ghetto?
Yes.
And what was their function?
Well, their function is, I'm telling you, is just to come and just, they didn't do much good to us. Their job was to find people that they're old and sick, because the young people, they felt they want to keep because they could go to work. The Germans could use them for work.
Now, did the older people in the Jewish community in the ghetto try to organize anything for the children in terms of schooling or where it was done in their homes?
I don't remember that. I don't remember that.
By the time you were ready to leave the Breziny ghetto, or it was time for them to come and take you to another ghetto, what condition were you and your family in physically?
I was fine. My parents, Wasn't so bad. It wasn't good. Let's put it this way. But it wasn't bad. I mean, we were hoping we're going to the Lodz ghetto, but we heard that people in the Lodz ghetto is dying. They're dying. They have sickness. They get all kinds of disease, and they're shipping out people.
How did you hear this?
Well, not till we came to the Lodz ghetto.
But you didn't hear it while
We
you...
heard from the people that they were escaping, that they were shipping, and we met them, and they were going further than that. Further escaping from the Lodz ghetto, from our ghetto. The Breziny ghetto at that time was already too late. They didn't do anything. It's just before the Breziny ghetto, that's what they were doing.
Now you say you remained in the Breziny ghetto for 6 months, about 6 months.
More or less.
Do you remember the date that you left the Breziny ghetto
Yes.
to go to the Lodz ghetto? What was
Yes.
that date?
That day was, I just had that piece of paper. What happened? In 19...
Approximately what was the date?
I think it was September. I'm not
In what
sure.
year?
And, I just had it.
It's in your purse, I think.
No. Yeah, I got it. You're right. You're right. It was in 1942.
And what happened in 1942? How did you find out that you were
No,
going
it
to be
wasn't in 1942. It couldn't be in 1942. It was in 1941 that we went to the Lodz ghetto.
Do you remember what time of year it was that you went to the Lodz
No, we
ghetto?
did go in 1942. I'm sorry. Yes, in April.
In April 42.
Right.
How did you find out that you were going to be leaving the Breziny ghetto?
They told us.
Were they closing the ghetto at that time?
Yeah, they shipped out everybody. Everybody had to go out from the ghetto. They were coming into finding people because a lot of people were trying to hide. So the Germans went from one house, from one building, from one corner to the next corner, and they were trying to get out the people.
Now, before this happened, when you saw all these people disappearing from the Breziny ghetto, did you or your family ever talk about what might happen to you?
We didn't know.
Was it a concern that you spoke about, though? when
Where
you
we were
together?
always concerned.
How did they take you? How did they round you up to take you to the Lodz ghetto?
I think there was a, they took us by train. Yeah. We went by train.
What type of train did you travel
It was
in?
a closing train.
It was a regular train? Or you were in...
No, it was a closing train. I don't remember really. How did we go to the Lodz ghetto? I don't remember really whether the buses came in or I don't remember that. Would you
About
believe
how
that?
far was the Lodz ghetto?
Not far at all.
So you were there relatively rapidly.
I was always in the Lodz ghetto because I had my mother's family in the Lodz ghetto. So we always went by horse, what do you call, one of those...
Horse and buggies?
Yeah, yeah.
Even when you were in the Breziny ghetto, you were able to go out?
No.
Prior to that?
Yes, before that.
Now, when you arrived at the Lodz ghetto, what was the first thing that you saw when you came into the Lodz ghetto? Do you remember?
I didn't find my cousins.